Open a map of Kyoto. Look at the streets. They cross each other in clean right angles, block after block, like graph paper laid over the land. Most old cities grow like a tangle of roots, bending around hills and rivers and whoever built first. Kyoto was drawn with a ruler. That grid is more than 1,200 years old, and no fire, no war, and no emperor has ever managed to erase it. You are standing on one of those lines right now if you are anywhere in the center of the city. You just do not know it yet. The question is simple. Why does a plan sketched in the year 794 still decide where you turn today? Walk back with me, not into a museum, into the moment the very first line was cut into the earth. It is late in the 8th century. The country is young and it is nervous. The court has just spent decades in the city of Nara, and Nara has become a problem. Powerful Buddhist temples have grown so wealthy and so close to the throne that monks are meddling in who gets to rule. An emperor named Kanmu decides he has had enough. He will do the most drastic thing a ruler can do. He will move the capital itself and leave the temples behind. His first attempt fails. A new site at Nagaoka is abandoned after less than 10 years, shadowed by scandal and by the assassination of one of his own officials. So Kanmu tries again. In 794, he chooses a wide basin ringed by mountains on 3 sides, with clear rivers running through it, and he names his new city Heian. The words mean roughly the capital of peace and tranquility. It is a hope pressed into a name. But here is the part that matters. Kanmu does not simply pick a spot and let a town grow. He orders the whole city planned in advance, down to the last avenue, before most of it even exists, and he copies his design from the greatest, most dazzling city on earth at that time. That city was Chang'an, the capital of Tang Dynasty China. It was one of the largest cities in the world, a place of 1 million people, laid out as a vast rectangle of walls and gates and dead straight streets. To the Japanese court, Chang'an was not just a city, it was civilization itself, the proof of what an ordered empire should look like. So Kanmu built a smaller mirror of it in the hills of Yamashiro. Picture what rises from the fields, a great rectangle, longer than it is wide. At the very north, the palace enclosure, where the emperor lives and the government works. From the palace, a single enormous avenue runs straight south through the whole city, splitting it into 2 perfect halves. This is Suzaku Avenue, and it is not a street so much as a statement. It is wide enough to march an army down. It ends at a grand southern gate, the Rashomon, the gate that would one day give a famous film its name. Now fill in the rest. Streets running north to south, streets running east to west. They cross at right angles again and again, carving the city into a checkerboard of neat rectangular blocks. And the court does something so practical it feels almost modern. It numbers the avenues. 1st Avenue nearest the palace, 2nd Avenue below it, 3rd, 4th, 5th, marching south in order. In Japanese, 1st Avenue is Ichicho, 3rd is Sanjō, 4th is Shijō. Hold on to those names. You are going to hear them again in a moment, and it is going to be stranger than you expect. For now, understand what this grid was for. It was a machine for order. Where you lived told the world who you were. The closer to the palace in the north, the higher your rank. Nobles clustered near the top of the city. The grid did not just organize traffic, it organized society and stamped the whole hierarchy of the court straight into the ground. And on that grid, something extraordinary grew. Not an empire of conquest, an empire of taste. This is the Heian period, and for the next 4 centuries the court inside the city turns refinement into an art form. The way you folded a letter mattered. The exact shade of the 12-layered robes a lady wore, glimpsed at a sleeve, could be judged for weeks. Poetry was not a hobby. It was how you flirted, how you mourned, how you climbed. Somewhere on this grid, in the early 11th century, a woman known to us as Murasaki Shikibu is serving at court and writing a long, aching story about a prince and the women around him. We call it the Tale of Genji, and many people call it the world's first novel. Down another street, a sharp-eyed rival named Shonagon is filling a private notebook with lists of things she loves and things she cannot stand. We call it the Pillow Book. They were writing inside the grid. Every carriage that carried them to a lover's gate, every procession, every whispered scandal moved along these numbered avenues. The straight lines were the stage, and the most delicate culture in Japanese history played out on top of them. So the plan worked, except it did not. Not the way Kanmu drew it. Here is the twist the neat map never shows you. The western half of the city, the right capital, sat on low, marshy ground. It flooded. It was unhealthy, and within a couple of centuries people simply stopped living there. That whole side of the perfect rectangle thinned out into fields and ruins. The city quietly slid eastward, off its own design, toward the river. The flawless grid on paper was never fully filled in real life. And then came the fire. In the 15th century, a dispute over who would succeed the shogun exploded into a war fought right inside the capital. It is called the Ōnin War, and it burned from 1467 to 1477.
For a decade, rival armies camped in the streets of Kyoto and set them alight. Temples, palaces, whole districts, gone. Contemporary accounts describe the capital reduced to scorched, empty ground where foxes moved through the ash. The city that had stood for 600 years was in large part simply erased. So ask yourself the obvious question. After the marsh emptied one half, after 10 years of war burned much of the rest, how is that grid still here? How does a plan survive when the buildings on it do not? This is where the answer turns quietly beautiful. Because the grid was never really in the stones. The wooden palaces rotted or burned. The great Suzaku Avenue faded until it was just an ordinary street. But the plan itself had moved somewhere fire could not reach. It had moved into how people gave directions. It lived in the names. When the survivors came back after the Ōnin War and began to rebuild, they did not invent a new city. They rebuilt on the lines they still carried in their speech, the same numbered avenues their grandparents had walked. The idea was passed mouth to mouth, generation to generation, more durable than any wall. And that is why you are standing on it today. Go to central Kyoto now and look up at the street signs. You will find Sanjō, 3rd Avenue. You will find Shijō, 4th Avenue, one of the busiest shopping streets in the whole country, packed with people who have no idea they are walking the 4th line of an 8th century blueprint. Gojō, 5th Avenue. The numbers you heard a few minutes ago are not history. They are addresses. They are on the front of buses. They are how a person tells a friend where to meet for coffee tonight. Even the way Kyoto addresses work still leans on the grid. Instead of a simple street number, people locate a place by which 2 crossing streets it sits near, and whether it is above or below, east or west of that corner. To find a building, you think in terms of the intersection of 2 of Kanmu's lines. You navigate, without knowing it, by a system designed to organize an emperor's court. Think about what that means. The temples Kanmu fled from are long gone from power. The empire he modeled his city on, Tang China, collapsed more than 1,000 years ago, and Chang'an itself faded. The novel written on these streets is over 1,000 years old, and yet the humble grid, the least glamorous thing he made, the plain crossing of lines, outlived all of it. It outlived its own creator, its own buildings, its own war. That is the quiet lesson buried under Kyoto. Monuments fall. The spectacular things, the palaces and the golden halls, are exactly the things that burn first. What survives is the plainest thing of all. The pattern, the habit, the way people agree to find each other. So open a map of Kyoto again. Look at those streets, crossing in their patient right angles. You are not looking at a Marin city. You are looking at the oldest surviving thought in Japan, still telling 1,200 years of strangers, quietly, exactly where to stand.